These are preliminary numbers for 2007. Obviously, this is a calendar year. We have not gotten to the end of the year yet. But the number of sheep this year may be down a little bit, but the number of cattle killed, confirmed killed by wolves, is up a little bit. And these are confirmed losses, not probable or undocumented. These are confirmed by the Federal Agency of Wildlife Services that has to go out and find the carcass, and that's enough evidence on the carcass and in the surrounding area confirmed that a wolf actually killed that animal. So this is the low end, but you can still see the trends over time. And if you really look, things started to jump up in the 2003, 2004 period when, you know, it was a short time after wolves had reached recovery levels in the state and expansion started to occur in more and more of the higher conflict areas. And as a result, control actions have increased since 2003 when the Fish and Wildlife Service was still in charge. In 2004, 2005, Fish and Game took over in 2005, authorizing lethal control. But it had already, you know, there's more and more conflict, more and more lethal control, more and more non-lethal. It could kind of get more and more difficult for a limited resource Fish and Game and other personnel to handle all this. Wolf population has been growing fairly steady. The yellow dots are again very preliminary numbers for this year, but we suspect that they'll be in the close to 800 wolves when it's all said and done. Okay, the packs and breeding pairs. I've already indicated there's a difference between packs and breeding pairs, and you can see here that the black bars are the breeding pairs. When there's not very many wolves, it's easier to get all of your documentation in. But not every pack is going to breed and keep pups that survive all year long. There's a number of things that kill wolves. We lose about 20%, even without hunting, about 20% of our wolf population annually is either removed through control actions, illegal kills, road kills, natural mortality, dispersal, whatever. About 20%. And with that, we're still seeing 20% annual growth rate in our wolf population. But as the population grows, it becomes harder and harder to document breeding pairs, as I've already indicated. But if you look at this, the state plan minimum, the legislative plan, and all the Fish and Wildlife Service plan requires us to never allow the wolves to be relisted, which is 10 breeding pairs. And we have promised a 15 breeding pair through our state population management plan and our state legislative plan. Breeding pairs, which is this here, the black bars. And then we need a, you know, when you're approaching the stop sign, we don't ever want to relist wolves. We promised citizens of the United States, we promised the federal government, we promised the citizens of the state of Idaho that when the state takes over management, they will never ever be relisted. And in order to assure that, we can't manage at this low a level because we're just not that good. Anything can kill a wolf and then you drop below. So we're going to manage within this buffer zone at least, and this allows us, the further away you get from listing, the more flexibility you have all the way up to where we are today or higher. The greater the population, the more flexibility you have in harvest opportunity, in control actions, in providing more flexibility to control problems and more flexibility to allow harvest. The lower you get down to here, the more restrictive we have to get, the less we're allowed to be able to tell a rancher that he can shoot a wolf and get down too close. You're going to have to move wolves again and do all that stuff. We don't want to go there. So we want to manage at a level high enough. Now, when we listed mountain lions in the 70s as a big game animal, back then we never thought that the lion population, we never predicted the lion population would get as high as it is today, and we never had a very good handle on the number of mountain lions in the state like we do wolves. So we never had any kind of wolf number or a mountain lion number in it, and so we're not managing for a number of wolves in the state of Idaho. We're managing on the upper end, conflicts on the lower end. We have the middle. We have the flexibility to manage in between. And the state plan and our plan shows the further you get away from listing, the more flexible you get. When you come down, the more restrictive you get. That's all this is. That's all the previous slide shows. It's just the transition and what happens during that transition. Conflicts, harvest, the whole thing. Again, these are our proposals. This isn't set in stone. We're hoping for everybody's comments tonight. The way that we manage big game animals is we group our there are 99 big game management units in the state. All these little things are called big game management units. Most of you that are hunters recognize those. We group big game management units together for all of our species in different ways. For bears, mountain lions, and now wolves, we try to group them together in what we call data analysis units, or DAUs, and that's what we use for similar habitat conditions, similar conflict situations, but most importantly, the primary prey base of wolves is elk in Idaho. About 80% of their diet, of the elk's diet in Idaho, consists of elk. So we grouped elk zones, which many of you in here are familiar with, our elk zones. We grouped them together to create our wolf DAUs so that we could then look at similarity and conflicts and maybe even attempt to manage these DAUs somewhat cohesively. However, because they're grouped in DAUs doesn't mean that the rules within, for instance, the sawtooth zone all have to be the same. We can still manage wolves in Unit 39 differently than in Unit 34, but it helps us to group them together to collect data, because harvest of wolves will never be as high as deer or elk. And so you kind of have to group these units together. It allows us to get better information. Now, this is a table. Now, this is PowerPoint 101 says don't ever put anything up like this because it's just going to make people's eyes glaze over. So I'm just putting this up so that you can see it, but I'm going to refer to it here in a second. All this does is kind of shows the transition of few wolves and low conflict potential up in the higher end to high wolf density and high conflict. And then in these columns, you have your harvest strategy of decreasing, stabilizing, or increasing wolf populations, and the different strategies within each of those categories. So what that means is, for instance, current wolf population conflict level on the far left, you have high, moderate, and low population, high, moderate, and low conflicts. The next column, you have decrease population, high, moderate, high conflict. When you have moderate to high conflict, you are then you have your strategies aligned to allow you to reduce the population, decrease populations under some of these conflict levels. And if you have no conflicts, low populations, and low potential for conflicts, then you can actually increase populations on the other end. So higher populations and conflicts equals higher harvest. Lower populations and conflicts equals lower harvest. And to kind of show what that might mean is conflict management only, your progression from low populations and conflicts to high. You start off with conflict management only, like we were just beginning our wolf populations in the 90s, where you just deal with conflict management only. All the Fish and Wildlife Service is allowing us to do that. And then you get progressive to controlled hunts, and the general harvest with low quota. As the population increases, you have more opportunity, or your conflicts increase. Then you get into general harvest with high quota, and then you provide trapping opportunity. And then potentially depredation hunts, like we do with deer and elk populations that are too high. And you can get into those sorts of, this will never eliminate our need for wildlife services